A number of years ago, I remember doing a survey that indicated at that time, and I don't think it's probably changed much, that the number one risk, or shall I say, the type of, demographically, the type of church that had the greatest risk of litigation was a church in the 500 to 1,000 attendance. There are about 12,000 cases per year that I review, and I've done this for about 20 years now, and I can tell you that the number one risk for I think 19 of those 20 years has been sexual abuse of a minor. Now, if you add sexual misconduct involving an adult, typically a female counselee who's counseling with the senior pastor who's a male, the relationship that ends in some type of sexual contact, if you combine those two types of sexual misconduct, it blows everything else away.
So the number one thing that churches need to do to protect those children is they need to screen and they need to check references, whether they're a church of 100 or if they're a church of 1,000. When I was in charge of security at one of the churches, we did have somebody that did not pass a background check. And what surprised me the most is that they actually filled out the background check information because they came back as a pedophile. And so we actually had standards where they would have to check in as soon as they got onto the premises, and I'd have somebody shadow them the whole time they were on the premises. And their point to me was, we'll just go to a church that doesn't do screening. If there's any takeaway from this whole entire thing, is that you need to screen your people that are working with children or that have keys to the building and have the opportunity to get a child alone.
Or any employee.
Or any employee.
Yes.
They need to screen them.
Just by way of background, of course, in a 5-4 decision by the Supreme Court on June 26, 2015, the court ruled that the right of same-sex couples to marry is part of the 14th Amendment's guarantees of due process and equal protection of the laws, and therefore a state law that in any way limits this right is unconstitutional and void. Many ministers who are opposed on religious grounds to same-sex marriages are voicing concern over their potential liability for not performing such marriages. Well, is this fear well-founded or exaggerated? In my opinion, ministers need not be concerned about personal liability for refusing to perform same-sex marriages on the basis of their religious convictions. And I base this conclusion on 3 considerations. First, several decisions by the United States Supreme Court strongly suggest that the First Amendment guarantee of religious freedom permits clergy to perform or not perform marriages consistently with their religious beliefs.
Give us the difference that the courts are looking at between like a civil marriage and a religious marriage.
Yes, well, that's an important distinction. Many courts have commented on this, and many state legislatures have done so too. And the fact is, virtually all state marriage laws say that marriages can be based on or performed in accordance with the religious beliefs of the minister or the church that may be involved. Some marriages are done before civil magistrates, that's fine. But marriages can also be solemnized by ministers. And when that happens, that can be consistently with the church's doctrine. So the fact that maybe same-sex marriage is permitted in your state doesn't mean that a pastor has to perform same-sex marriage.
Could you tell me why Pluto is not a planet?
Well, because in 2007, at the triennial meeting of the International Astronomical Union, the IAU, which is the official astronomy designating body in the world, the status of Pluto, the definition of a planet, was to be considered. There are 10,000 members in this organization. During that 10-day convention, 2,400 people registered. On the 10th and final day, there were 400 left. Of those 400, when they took the vote on planet definition, 220 voted to define planet in such a way that it excluded Pluto and bumped it into the lower category of a dwarf planet. So the lesson here, church leaders, is always put the controversial issues at the end of the agenda.
It seems like, we mentioned embezzlements because they're becoming a lot more prolific in the newspaper, where you see millions of dollars stolen from a church or misappropriated at a church.
When you're looking at these embezzlement cases, and I've seen some of these, Jerry, like you say, in the millions of dollars. It's common to see them in the tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars. What do you do about that? And I can say this, that the vast majority of these cases are based on one defect, and that's the failure of the church to implement sound strategies or sound principles of internal control. By the way, what does that do? It causes members to be bewildered. You know, all the money we've given to this church is some of my offerings to my church have been confiscated by some treasurer or whatever, and it being used embezzled by that individual. It shakes the church in terms of the members' confidence in the financial structure of the church, and it often dampens charitable giving. People are less likely to give to the church when they see there's been such irresponsibility